Have you ever been writing an email or speaking with someone in English and suddenly paused because you weren't quite sure about a rule? You think to yourself, wait, do I say I have been living here since 3 years, or is it for 3 years? You take a guess, you say the sentence, and you keep moving through your day. Here's the frustrating part though. There's a good chance you asked yourself that exact same question last week, and the month before that, maybe even 2 years ago. The same tiny hesitation, showing up again and again, never quite resolved. The biggest hidden obstacle standing between you and real fluency usually isn't a lack of vocabulary. It's something quieter and far more stubborn, the habit of repeating the exact same mistakes over and over without ever fully realizing it. Language teachers actually have a name for this. They call them fossilized errors. These are small mistakes in grammar, in preposition choice, in word selection that have become deeply embedded in your brain over time. Because nobody corrects you every single time you speak, your mind quietly assumes these small errors are actually correct, and so you keep repeating them, sometimes for years, without noticing. You end up stuck at the same intermediate level, feeling like your progress has simply frozen in place. Here's something important to understand though. Simply knowing a grammar rule from a textbook won't fix a deeply rooted habit. To actually break a habit, you have to shine a very direct light onto it. You need a real system for tracking it. Today, we're going to walk through how to build something called an active mistake tracking notebook. We'll cover exactly how to log your errors properly, set up a genuinely practical weekly review routine, and talk about how to turn those very mistakes into powerful flashcards that work in your favor instead of against you. Let's start with how to log your errors the right way. To begin this system, all you really need is a small physical notebook, or even just a blank document on your phone. Let's call this your error journal. A lot of learners make the mistake of trying to write down every single error they make throughout the day. And that approach almost always backfires. If you try to track 50 different mistakes at once, you'll feel completely overwhelmed within a matter of days. Your motivation will drop, and the whole system quietly falls apart before it even has a chance to work. Instead, what you're really looking for are your recurring patterns. Focus only on the mistakes that show up again and again during your daily writing, your speaking practice, or your language lessons. When you spot a mistake, whether it comes from an online grammar checker, feedback from a teacher, or simply noticing it yourself mid-sentence, don't just quietly write down the corrected version. That's far too passive. Your brain will glance at it once and forget it almost immediately. To log a mistake in a way that actually sticks, divide your page into 3 simple columns. The first column is the trap. Write down the exact incorrect sentence you originally said or wrote, word for word. You might draw a line through it, or mark it clearly. Something like, I am agree with your opinion, with a clear mark showing it's wrong. The second column is the correction. Write the correct version of that same sentence right next to it. I agree with your opinion. The third column is what we can call the why, the underlying rule. Here, explain the mistake to yourself, in your own simple words, not copied from some dense grammar textbook. Keep it short and genuinely practical. Something like, agree is a complete verb on its own. It doesn't need the helping word am in front of it. Why does this 3-column approach work so well? Because it forces your brain to actually examine the exact moment where your logic went wrong. You're not just memorizing a dry, abstract grammar formula sitting somewhere in a book. You're directly comparing your own personal habit against the correct structure, side by side. That comparison creates a strong mental flag, one that tends to quietly resurface the next time you're about to make that same mistake again. Now, logging your mistakes is genuinely only the first half of this process. If you fill an entire notebook with page after page of errors, but never actually open it again, your old habits will simply take over, exactly like before. Your brain needs consistent, repeated exposure to the correct pattern in order to actually replace the old one. This is where the weekly review system comes in. Pick one fixed day each week, maybe a quiet Sunday morning, and set aside exactly 15 minutes to sit down with your error journal. You don't need to review the entire notebook cover to cover. Just focus on whatever errors you logged during the past 7 days. Here's a simple 2-step active recall drill to run through each week. First, the cover test. Take a blank sheet of paper and cover up the second and third columns completely, leaving only the first column visible, the one containing your original incorrect sentences. Look at that first incorrect sentence. Read it out loud. Identify exactly what's wrong with it, and state the correct version clearly. out loud before you allow yourself to check your work. Once you've made your attempt, slide the paper aside and check columns 2 and 3 to see how you did. Second, the marking game. If you correctly identified the mistake and clearly stated the right rule without hesitating, place a small check mark next to that row. But if you struggled to remember why it was wrong, or if you ended up making the exact same mistake again while trying to recall it, place a small star next to that row instead. That star is simply telling you, this particular error is still genuinely dangerous for you, and it needs a bit more focused attention over the coming week. Once a specific error earns 3 check marks in a row, across 3 separate weekly reviews, you've officially conquered it. At that point, you can cross it off your list for good. Your brain has genuinely rewritten that old habit, replacing it with the correct English pattern for the long term. This simple, short weekly habit turns your notebook from a discouraging pile of past failures into an active, living roadmap, one that's constantly guiding you toward greater accuracy. Now, every so often, you'll notice a handful of starred errors that simply refuse to go away, no matter how many weekly reviews you run through. When that happens, it usually means the habit sitting behind that mistake is unusually deep, deep enough that a weekly glance isn't quite enough on its own. To finally break through these particularly stubborn errors, pull them directly out of your notebook and fold them into your regular daily study routine by turning them into what we can call sentence completion flashcards. Grab a blank card, or open whatever flashcard app you already use. On the front of the card, write your original incorrect sentence, but turn the specific problem area into a blank space instead. Underneath it, add a small clue in brackets, just enough to nudge your brain in the right direction. For example, on the front, you might write, I have been studying English blank 3 years, with a small clue underneath reading. Use a time preposition. On the back of that same card, write the single correct word or short phrase that fills in that blank, along with a brief reminder of the underlying rule. In this case, the back might simply say 4, along with a quick note explaining that 4 is used to describe a duration or a length of time. Why does this particular flashcard method work so much better than standard vocabulary flashcards? Because when most people build flashcards, they're often memorizing brand new, somewhat random words they may never actually use in real life. But when your flashcards come directly from your own error journal, you're studying your specific personal weaknesses. Every single card on that stack represents a real mistake your brain has genuinely made before, not a hypothetical one pulled from a textbook. By quizzing yourself on these custom cards during small spare moments throughout your day, waiting for a bus, drinking your morning coffee, standing in line somewhere, you're directly targeting your own personal blind spots. Over time, this trains your brain to instinctively make the correct choice, right in the middle of a real live conversation, quietly eliminating your long-standing errors, one at a time. Making mistakes is a completely normal, even healthy part of learning any new language. Nobody becomes fluent without stumbling along the way. But making the exact same mistake, year after year, without ever addressing it directly, is essentially a quiet choice to remain stuck at the same level indefinitely. By building an active error journal, running a consistent weekly review, and creating targeted flashcards from your own real mistakes, you take genuine control of your own progress. You stop guessing. You stop unconsciously repeating the same old habits. And you start refining your English with real, measurable momentum. So here's your action step for today. Open up an old email you sent recently, a comment you left online somewhere, or an essay you wrote a while back. Run that piece of writing through a free grammar checking tool. Find just one single mistake, something you've made before, possibly more than once. Draw your 3 columns on a piece of paper. Log that mistake right now, and take the very first step in turning your past errors into your future fluency. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.